Vice President JD Vance is spending this evening in Iowa. He's stumping for Republican Congressman Zach Nunn in Des Moines. Nunn's seat is one that Democrats are eyeing as a potential flip in November. And that is exactly where we find our Ed O'Keefe. Ed, it's great to see you. You know, Iran is the talk of the town here in Washington, but I wonder if that's the case in America's heartland and whether the vice president will weave that into his speech tonight.
Well, Weege, it's very good to see you. We are awaiting the vice president's arrival. He's just landed in the Hawkeye State a little while ago on a full day of stops in the Midwest. He voted this morning in his home state of Ohio ahead of the primary there, was at a fundraiser in Oklahoma City, and is coming here to a congressional district that is very much on the minds of both parties as they fight over control of the House. And when you talk to people in this state, at the gas pump or out on their farms, yes, Iran is very much on their minds because the cost of things has gone up since late February when the war began. Take, for example, Aaron Lehman, who's a farmer up in Polk City, about 20, 30 minutes outside of Des Moines. We talked about the fact that prices have spiked for things like fertilizer and diesel, and that's rubbing off on all sorts of other parts of the Iowa economy, including manufacturing companies like this one. Listen to what Aaron had to tell us. So when this White House says it's the best friend a farmer has ever had, you say?
That doesn't say much about my friends, because people are out here hurting. You know, the rhetoric about a golden age of agriculture right around the corner, that doesn't match the reality of what's going on the ground at all.
So if the president or the vice president picked up the phone and said, Aaron, what do we need to be doing differently, what would you tell them?
Well, right now we're trying to pass a farm bill, but the version that came out of the House does not match the circumstances we're under. Not for costs, not for the challenges farmers are facing, not for the challenges that our consumers are facing. It is outdated before it even gets passed. So pass a farm bill that reflects current conditions.
We are expecting the vice president to talk a bit about what it is the administration is doing to help farmers and manufacturing companies in this state when he speaks in a little bit. But based on our conversation with Aaron, he's got a lot of convincing to do, Ouija.
And Ed, of course, those issues, along with costs in general, are big concerns in Indiana and Ohio, where it is primary day. Republicans there who defied Trump on redistricting are now facing MAGA challengers. So lay out what you expect to see from there tonight.
So when the Indiana Republicans were approached about redistricting in the Hoosier state, about 40 state lawmakers told the White House they were not on board with doing so based on conversations essentially with their constituents who said, we only do this every 10 years. We're not going to do it now. 8 of those 40 are on the ballot today in primaries, and they're being challenged by candidates backed by the White House and Trump-aligned groups spending millions of dollars against them in what would otherwise be sleepy contests. One of those state senators who told the White House no is Spencer Deary. Listen to why he said redistricting is something they shouldn't do in Indiana. Take us back to when the White House first broached the idea of having legislators in Indiana redraw the map, and what their argument was, and why you ultimately decided you just couldn't support that idea.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the reasons why they wanted us to. I mean, I too want to maintain a Republican congressional majority, but ultimately I don't work for them. I work for my constituents, and also I work for the state of Indiana. And so as I started to look into it, the first thing that set off alarm bells for me is recognizing that really no party, Republican or Democrat, has ever systematically attempted to redraw the maps midterm like this, mid-cycle. And if we start doing that as a country, it takes power from the people and gives it to the government to be able to shield themselves from accountability. And that was a big concern as a constitutional conservative. But I also started to hear from my constituents that it wasn't really something they wanted me to do.
They have spent millions of dollars, at least $6 million, on these 8 state Senate primaries today, Ouija, and it's gotten a bit personal, as State Senator Deary told us. Take a listen. When you put yourself in opposition to the president, you said you were getting robocalls, or your constituents were getting robocalls. There's been millions of dollars in attack ads, both on the air and digitally. But my understanding is that the attacks or the threats against you and your family have been far more intense.
Well, we were a series of lawmakers were swatted or attempted at swatting. Fortunately for myself, I wasn't one of the first, and so we had the protocols in place to be able to make sure it wasn't law enforcement kicking down the door. But there certainly have been a few death threats, and that are something that I had never had in my years as a state senate. Really, this whole process has felt like Washington, D.C. coming to Indiana in terms of the politics and some of the culture of there. And, typically when Hoosiers run for federal office, they say, we want to take Indiana to D.C., an Indiana way of doing business in D.C. This has felt like D.C. trying to come to Indiana to force D.C. upon Indiana.
And the president weighed in just a little while ago on Truth Social, just saying that good luck to those great Indiana Senate candidates who are running against people who couldn't care less about our country or about keeping the majority in Congress. There are a handful of contests across the country tonight. The president and his team are most definitely keeping an eye on those 8 contests in Indiana.
And so will you be. Thank you so much, Ed O'Keefe.